Okay, folks, it is 1 o'clock. I'd like to get started because, again, I know everyone, whether you are working in an office or from home, I know that everyone's got a lot going on. So I want to make sure we're mindful of your time. I want to welcome you to, I think this is the fourth or fifth, actually, in the Dennis C. Miller Spring 2020 series of webinars. So thank you so much for joining us. We have nearly 200 people signed up today, which is just so exciting for us. And we're so glad that people are finding our webinars useful and informative. Today's topic is crisis funding. What are foundations looking for from nonprofit applicants? Just a few helpful housekeeping tips. If they aren't already, please make sure your webcams are off and your microphones are set to mute. That helps avoid interference so that everyone can get the most out of the program. There will be a time for question and answer at the end of the program. If you would have a question, I invite you to post it in the chat box of the Zoom platform. You can either send your question publicly, or if you like to send it privately, send it to Dennis Miller-host. That means that I will see your question and I can make sure that we get Susan's take on the topic when we get to the Q&A. I would like to introduce our guest speaker today. We have with us Susan Hairston. Susan has been with Dennis C. Miller and Associates for about 6 months, Susan, is that right?
No, it's a little less than that.
A little less than that. All right. We just feel like we've known her forever. That's why we say it that way. But we're thrilled. Susan is also CEO of Susan Hairston Consulting, and she works to strengthen nonprofits that serve marginalized communities, something I'm sure we can all relate to in this meeting. Susan is a valued coalition builder. She's organized events that bring together government officials and diverse organizations across the globe. She's served on several government and nonprofit boards, including as commissioner of the Union County Board of Taxation, the Center for Effective Philanthropy Advisory Board, the Union County College Board of Governors, the Summit New Jersey Board of Education, and as co-chair of the Summit Mayors Forum for Diversity. She is our very own history maker, having been elected last November as the City of Summit's first African-American council member. She has degrees from the University of Pittsburgh and the Seton Hall University. She's an Ascent Fellow from Dartmouth's Tuck School of Business. And before she began her consulting firm, she directed grants management at the JPB Foundation, a $4 billion foundation that focuses on transformational initiatives. And she also has directed the Ford Foundation's $450 million annual grant-making operations team. She's also received awards from the Tri-City NAACP and Summit Good Scouts Award and the Martin Luther King Keeper of the Dream Award. So Susan, we're thrilled to have you and welcome.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everyone. Yes, I'm Susan Hairston, and when you hear all of that stuff, I'm humbled and honored, and I have been waiting for this moment. So I want to just begin by again thanking Dennis Miller, who opened his arms to me quite a while ago when I was doing executive, thinking about joining another firm, and he was going to represent me. And as Dennis said to me in one of those conversations, Susan, you want to run your own business. So I appreciate the relationship that I've had with him and him welcoming me into the Dennis Miller family. And we're getting an opportunity to work with awesome professionals who care about the nonprofit sector, Michelle Hickey and Greg Nielsen, Joe Duffy and Anthony. It is a pleasure being with you all. And I want to shout out the Susan Hairston Consulting Group. I have the privilege of partnering with some amazing individuals, Deanne Chavanes, Susan Hardison Chase, and Ray Wilburn. And who keeps us all organized is Elijah Griffith. And we are the Susan Hairston Consulting Group. Yes, you heard, we believe in strengthening foundations that serve marginalized communities. And we offer services having to do with finding a funding strategy, assessing your organization, strategic planning. We look for that financial health check because we have an operations background. We have been leaders in the nonprofit and the philanthropy space and the legal sector. So we do leadership coaching and this digital strategy work that says how you can tell your story online. That is the Susan Hairston Consulting Group, and nonprofits are our people. And it brings us to this moment of this topic, crises funding. What are foundations looking for from their nonprofit applicants? You all, I have been waiting for this moment to share all of the secrets from the foundation world and to tell you that they are not the evil geniuses that they may come across to be. They totally care about you and about your work. And but we often speak different languages. And so what has this moment of COVID-19 showed us in many areas? There is no more business as usual when it comes to securing funds for your nonprofit organization. There's really no more business as usual, period. As we try to assemble our wits and meet with our staff, our boards, our friends, our associations, as we attend webinars and really look for people who have the answers, we've experienced disruption that's requiring a whole new set of tools to operate. And the folks who have the resources to solve our funding problem, the funders, they're also disrupted and they're scrambling to find their way to do business. And so it may seem that they're making it up as they go along, and sometimes they may be, because not all funders are created equal. We have private foundations, and that's my area of expertise, and that's basically what I'm going to be speaking most to during this webinar. But we have corporate foundations. We have family foundations, community foundations, private donors, giving circles. I've just come to be familiar with giving circles. And we have donor advised funds. Now, we also know not all nonprofits are created equal. We know that they are of all different types, of all different sizes, and they are in different locations. But what I have for you up here is a slide telling you what the IRS says. And I pulled this from ProPublica because we are all guided by IRS rules and regulations, and there are different types of foundations. And so we are not created equal. So I say all that to say we've got so many different languages that we are speaking to. And when we're talking about crises funding and versus traditional funding, I'm sharing with you from the foundation's perspective. What are they talking about when they are talking about crises and emergency funding versus the traditional funding? And so what are the characteristics of the relationship of traditional funding from the perspective of the foundation? I want you to know, folks, they have done months, years of planning, and they have their own goals and strategies, sometimes long-term, sometimes short-term. And so in their regular grant making, they're thinking about how are they achieving their strategies. What you're aware of is they have types of grants that are dealing with a specific project or maybe a specific set of activities or even a population or a particular outcome that they want. These are what they're thinking about in their strategies for grant making. And what I know, better than even foundations, there's a lot of negotiation going on back and forth about what is it that they want you to carry out, and what is it that you want to carry out, and how they can best fund you in that relationship. So what is different about crises and emergency funding in the eyes of the foundations? So you are at the center of their thinking. And that is why I really am excited about this moment, sad about Corona, but this is when foundations are thinking most about you. And what is one way that they can do that? It is a great time for them to be giving you unrestricted and general operating support that can be used for unspecified charitable purposes. Now, you know the IRS always has restrictions that apply, but this is an opportunity when foundations are saying, here, you know best what you need to do. There are time-bound, typically short durations for these grants. And someone was from Catholic Charities, I believe, gave a question that said, gee, this is tough that they do these short time frames. Well, what they're trying to do, like I said, you are at the center of their attention, and they want you to be able to use those funds for in the moment that we're in, because we don't want the crises to be forever way of operating. This is when they are thinking about different purposes, and it really could be, like I said, just for the organization. They may want to just make sure you are the best at doing what you're doing, and we want to make sure you can get back on your feet. And it can be for a specific client who they, population. And this is what I want to make sure you're aware of, that you are at the center. And here is when private foundations will take the opportunity to give different rules and requirements to access these crises funds. And they will even sometimes give you a different way to report on them. So what is the good news and the bad news about crises funding? And I've shared one with you, that there are more opportunities now for you to qualify because you're at the center of their thinking. Now, what's the bad news? The need still outweighs the funding. Okay, so let me see, what am I talking about with the good news? What are funders doing? They are highly motivated to help. They are not restrained by what's going on with their strategies and goals. Some of them still are, but they are in a moment of trying to ease restrictions and barriers for applying. They are really popping up opportunities for new sources of funding to become available. Corporations, unlikely folks are high wealth individuals are making funds available for this crisis period of time. And if you are one of those nonprofits who had a good relationship with a funder, you are on their mind, and they should be chasing you down to give you money. And what I learned from one of my clients' board members is the IRS has changed the charitable deduction rules. And for 2020, charitable donations are going to be 100% deductible. So in the spirit of those who have high wealth donors, it's a good time for them. All right, now I'm a pragmatic person, and have to tell you there's bad news that goes along with it. And we know it's a pandemic. And frankly, our funders are scrambling to restore their operations. So I can't emphasize enough, we put them on a pedestal and we think that everything is so perfect in their world. And actually, they are dealing with some of the very same things that we're dealing with in trying to restore their operations. One of the things we do know about foundations, it's a closed circle. And folks in leadership, management, and even in the trenches are affiliated all over the place in as board members, as like myself, an elected official, and they are on corporate boards, and they're actually leading nonprofits. So guess what? They are busier than ever. And it may be hard for you to get a hold of them. You think they're ignoring you, but actually they're just very busy. And one of the things that I know is happening is they are really thinking about all of their ecosystem and the different constituents and how to be judicious and fair. And they want to make sure those who have that corporate way of thinking, that how can we get the best return on our investment with a grant that we're making? They want to get good press, and they have many competing priorities and tensions. And so sometimes I like to call this navel gazing, because they're looking in, trying to figure out how to do it. What I also know to be the good news for those who have relationships with foundations, those who don't, they have a preference for those that they already know. So I'm not going to leave you with just bad news. The good news, the more good news, this is not a moment to be overwhelmed or paralyzed, because you, the nonprofit sector, you are the ones who make things happen when no one else is able to. You have a way of getting things done. You're persistent, you're creative, you turn lemons into lemonade, and you don't give up. There is nobody more equipped for this moment than what is termed the third economy, because you generate a lot of money and a lot of activity, a lot of jobs. The nonprofit sector is up to the charge at this moment. So where do I want to take you during these next 15 minutes? Because I want to give you time to ask questions. I want to reveal these secrets. I am wanting you to think, to know, what do funders need and want from you? Okay. And I also want you to be thinking about, what do you need to know before you're applying for these crises dollars? What is the work you could be doing and that you need to know so that you can engage well? And I also want you to think outside the box about how you can look for funding in different ways. Okay? So this is something you may have heard before. It's not easy giving away money. Now, do you want to hear that? I know you don't, because it is easier giving away money than it is chasing after it. But I want you to know, foundations are so highly regulated. And I know they should be, because they have quite a bit of power and influence. And they are not paying taxes. They are on at the level that other corporations are. And I know that's a little tricky nowadays, but there is IRS code, a whole section that is devoted just to charities and nonprofits. And you, like foundations, are very heavily regulated. So much so that there are just tons of lawyers and accounting firms and those personal bankers who have to stay up to date with all that is going on with IRS code and all of the regulations. And it's not just at the federal level. Like you, foundations are subject to state regulations and even local and municipal regulations. And lastly, they have their boards who are required to have governing policies that talk about how they operate. And it is their not only reputations that are online, there are fees that are assigned to the fiduciaries who are responsible for the foundation work, and that's the boards, if they are audited and they get fines. And so these are the many things that they're thinking about on their side, and I know you are thinking about it as well. In that regard, what are they required to collect? And I know that is a big source of frustration for nonprofits. Being on the grants management side, it was always an area that I felt so bad about, because we had many different kinds of requirements of what we would ask nonprofits to provide us, and you would have to be doing the same thing over and over again. And then I know we came up with some standards and with some software that we thought were going to make it easier for you. And in some ways, I learned that online portals were just making it miserable for you all. And so what are foundations required to collect? Really not that much, according to the regulations. And basically, by the IRS's standards, they have to collect in documentation. They have to prove to the IRS that you are eligible to receive their charitable funds. And I want to just take a sidebar about a movement. It's called trust-based philanthropy, that has really tried to help foundations think about this role that they have in not being a watchdog of you all, but having a relationship with you that is more of a partnership. And it brings into consideration the relationship, but also goes even more about how you can work well with foundations. So I take that to departure to have you aware of this if you want to know what watchdogs of philanthropy are saying. And so that's what I wanted you to know, that they are not required to collect a lot of information from you, but they want to. They want to demonstrate that they are being good stewards. And because they have many people who are watching them, and having the privilege of working with tax exempt dollars and tax shelter dollars, they want to be able to tell the story of what's happening in a compliant way. And so what I want you to know they're thinking about, even in crisis times, what happens after the crisis is over and someone didn't like what I did? And what is it that I have to be prepared to answer to? And what that risk lens that they have to have, and what they need to be able to demonstrate to many actors is that they have done their due diligence to make sure that the organizations they've granted to have the capacity to receive, use, and account for the funds, and not just the money, the programming, that it's done in a legal, ethical, and impactful way. And I want that to register with you for a moment, because I know that looks different to every single foundation. And that is why it is confusing to you as a nonprofit, because one foundation might have one standard for how they hold you accountable, and another may be much more risk adverse and allow you to have lots of freedom to make mistakes, and have the capacity to speak to that, because they have shored up their internal operations in that way. And so this is something I'm asking you to take your hat off and think about what is on their mind. And so I want to go to the second bullet that I says, what I want you to know. And this I want you to know is my recommendation. These are things that Susan Hairston, wants you to think about before applying for crises funding, because I'm trying to get you to think outside of the box. And I'm calling this applicant due diligence. And you can imagine, because I have that operations background, due diligence is on my mind. And what does that look like? It looks like some questions I want you to ask yourself. I am asking you to think about who funds organizations with missions like yours? All right. And why would I be asking you that? Is because I want to make sure you know who is doing your work. You are not alone. And if it's the only thing you take away from this webinar, is now is not the time to be operating on your own. And so I want you to think about who are organizations with missions like yourself. And I want you to, if you don't already belong to an association, I want you to find one. A very, very important question that foundations are thinking about is, what does the public know about you? What do experts in your field know about you, about your activities, about your accomplishments? What deliverables do you have? What outcomes do you produce? And what impact do you make with your organization? And so I know you've been thinking about that, because that's how you came into existence. And, but here's something I want you to do. I want you to Google your organization, and I want you to pretend you're the funder. And I want to know, did you find all of the things that if you were a funder and had $1 million to give away, did you find what you as a funder would want to reveal about you? And I want you to write those things down. This is a very big deal for me. And one of the things that I really want you to make sure you know, how much does it cost your organization to run effectively, optimally, and then in bare bones? And this assignment that I have for you is, I want you to become an expert at knowing different scenarios for budgeting for your organization, because in crisis times, the foundation is going to ask you, what do you need? I only have this pool of money. And you need to know, if I wanted to be the best and you have excess funds, this is what I need. And then if you need to be able to operate at the least amount of resources, what does that look like? So I want you to become an expert at scenario budgeting for your organization, or at the least hire someone. So I got some more questions for you to think about. And your organization, yes, your infrastructure, but this area that I'm asking you to look at, it's each program and area that you deliver services in. What level of excellence or even just efficacy that you can just do for that particular program? And this is where you need to know how flexible you're able to be, because what the bad news is, not everyone is going to make it out of this crisis, not every organization, and even your own programs. And you need to be able to know what programs you're going to have to make sure another one of your partner organizations are taking care of those services. And if you had to scale down. So I want you to be able to readily create different budgets for those programs and services that you deliver. And then also, something that people sometimes don't have the time to do, but I am saying you must do. You must know how your organization aligns with the funders that you are currently being funded by, but also those that you want to go after dollars. And so the assignment is, you gotta do your homework about those funding organizations, those private foundations. And then lastly, the theme that I want to make sure you are hearing from me is, what are you doing to build relationships within your sector? I know one of the things I did in my career, both at the foundation world and in the nonprofit world, was to keep my head down and work really, really hard and not keep up with all that was going on around me. We know that giving is about relationships. Being at the top of your game is about relationships, and also knowing what's changing and what opportunities. And so what others are doing, I give you the assignment to seek collaboration. And collaboration is hard. I know it's hard, but it's what is going to help many of us survive in these crises times. So this is my ask of you to look within, to think like foundations think. And I've given you a few assignments that will help you get out of your blind spots. I know foundations have many blind spots to you, and I want you to know that I am in the trenches to help remove those blind spots with you. The last bullet point, I wanted to give you some out-of-the-box thinking about how you can have resources to help you seek funding. And there's a couple I wanted to bring to mind. What will help you keep on top of what's happening within philanthropy? And these are tried and true resources. The Chronicle of Philanthropy. We've got United Philanthropy Forum and the Council on Foundations. This was news to me. I am much more familiar with the Council on Foundations, but I understand United Philanthropy Forum is a spinoff. And for those who might be joining from the West Coast or the Midwest, keep up with what's happening in their world. Know what's on their mind and see if there is any relationship to what's happening with you. And then I have a couple of non-traditional sources that I want you to consider. I just happen to be in love with idealist.org. I think of them as young folks who are optimistic and want to change the world. And they have developed communities there. And so they have such ideas. And I'm not sure if that's where the giving circles and some of the crowdfunding and different things came out of those group of people, but I recommend checking in non-traditional sources. And as an elected official, I have come to find out that our municipal, our county, and our state government knows who's giving away money, and you should stay on their websites, and you should stay in touch with what's going on, because you find out about funding opportunities through them. I also want you to have tools and to know how to research foundations. And there is none better than Candid, and which was formerly known as the Foundation Center, and they've joined forces with GuideStar. They are the end all or I shouldn't say the end all, but they are just an amazing source of foundation information. And I also want to alert you to LinkedIn. LinkedIn, if you have become familiar with how to use hashtags, I have been amazed at the number of foundations who are posting where they're giving money out. So I've given you some hashtags to use, and join on to LinkedIn and look there. And lastly, as I mentioned to you, you need to stay linked in with your sector. And these are a couple of resources that I have personally found to have great advice, tools, and information about your particular world. So on that note, I'm going to end and ask Michelle to come in and help me moderate any questions and answers that folks might have. Michelle, are you still with me?
There's a question. Yes, I am back. And,
okay.
And thank you, Susan, so much. Just before I go to the Dennis Miller public service announcements, I just want you to take note of Susan's website, and I'm sure she'd be happy to answer any questions if you contacted her directly. We still have a couple of upcoming webinars. We've been holding them on Wednesdays at 1 Eastern time. If you want to go to the next slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm usually on the other side of that conversation, so no worries. You can go to dennismiller.com Board Leadership Institute webinars to register for them. And then now you can go to the next slide.
Okay.
If you'd like to take a deeper dive, you can also register for one of Dennis's online courses in board leadership and executive leadership for nonprofits. Each online course has about a 6-hour runtime, but they are broken down into modules so that you can kind of take them in smaller bites and really reflect on what information he's giving you. So I think we are ready for question and answer, wouldn't you say?
I would say that.
Okay, the first question I'm gonna give you actually came via email, and I figured this participant took the time to email us like a week ago. So we're gonna make sure we get to her question first.
Oh, here it is.
Yes. She is asking that, she says, many funders are restricting their grant term to 6 months or possibly less during the crisis. How do we build upon the emergency funding to position our organizations to be prepared for what comes next?
Wow, that is a great question. And it is the challenge. One of the things that I said is the bad news. They've given you money for a particular point in time, and you have to leverage that opportunity with asking the foundation to see that it relates to a bigger picture. And this is when foundations have different ways of being a resource to nonprofits. They do convenings. They actually inform policymakers. And this is an opportunity for you to do advocating. And so while you have an opportunity through your reporting to make the case for why this is not a one-time event that is will stop when the funding ends, and really be talking about how it is something that needs to be considered going forward.
Okay, next question. What are, and you did mention GuideStar and Candid, and some of these resources used to be available free of charge, but now there are subscription fees. So someone in the group is asking, what are your thoughts on, well, it says, what are your thoughts on GuideStar, and is it a good idea to spend the money on it? And is it beneficial? And before I have you answer that, it is possible to access these tools for free if you go to the Foundation Center Library in New York, or a cooperating library, but that's not always possible. So if it isn't, and in order to use those resources, Susan, would you say that it's worth the investment?
I do, because I want you to know that if you are developing new relationships, folks are going to go online and look you up, and they are becoming the repository, making it much easier for foundations, and it is a good investment.
Okay.
It's a part of what Susan Hairston Consulting does in helping you create your digital presence. We advocate for absolutely signing up to GuideStar. I know it's expensive.
Yeah,
I'm not happy about that.
Yeah,
but
it is what it
makes
is.
you easily available to other folks.
Okay. Now, here's another question. Do you have any recommendations on how this COVID-19 environment, how in this COVID-19 environment, nonprofits might directly or through their clients and volunteers use platforms such as GoFundMe?
I actually have found that artists and young people have been amazing at using this as a resource. And it's a social justice vehicle, because marginalized communities are not on the timing radar of foundations, and young people have been amazing at
what do you mean by the timing radar?
Because like I said, foundations have had to figure out how to get funds out the door, the processes. And many of the artists and homeless and invisible populations have not been able to get in the queue, and they have used this as a tool. I don't know about it. I'm not expert on it, but because I care about those communities, I have seen them, I have donated, and I know it's an option.
So almost a tiny organization or startup can maybe buy themselves some time to get the foundation application in and to endure that timeline. Is that how you?
Yes, it has been a means of emergency funding.
Right, because it's quick, it's agile.
It is.
Okay. Another question is, what are your tips for approaching a foundation for the first time?
If I could click back to my slide, I said, do your homework. Absolutely know why you're approaching them and why they should be interested in you. You have to know whether they invite proposals or they are open to unsolicited. And so if you're approaching them for the first time, these are the things that cold calling doesn't make a lot of sense for private foundations. They, at the Ford Foundation, when I was there and we were tracking this, would get 40,000 inquiries and we're making 2,000 to 2,500 grants. And I know they're making less than that now.
Yeah.
So that is why I do not recommend cold calling private foundations.
Right. I just saw another question, Susan, and I lost it again. Someone is asking if you could provide a few examples of the kinds of collaborations that you're talking about.
So I know that my client, who is in the Los Angeles area, who did an amazing summer program with providing computer science and STEM related training. They did also gave a lunch program, and they did college readiness. And so they did all of these standalone. However, even before Corona, there was a change happening with their funder, and there was another organization that had an excellent college readiness program. And so with that in mind, we had talked about meeting and getting together and to see how we could, as nonprofits, take our expertise at the STEM classwork, and you who have a really excellent program with college readiness and visiting, let's see how we could do that together. And so that is why I say, know your sector, know who's out there. And foundations, private foundations are always pushing collaborations. They're always hosting meetings because they want you to have efficiency in being able to do the most that you can do. But I know it's hard. I do know it's hard.
Yeah, actually, I just got a text from Dennis, and he wanted me to also mention a collaboration between the Morris County Organization for Hispanic Affairs in Dover, New Jersey, and the Morristown Medical Center. And if memory serves, that focused on wellness activities, I'm thinking prevention, but screenings, providing screenings and prevention and education into communities that the hospital was not beforehand reaching. So that's another thing. And I'm thinking of another one. I work with an organization, well, it's really not even a formal organization, but it's a consortium of about 5 organizations that provides workshops and other resources. Right now we're doing online and email resources to do a better job of teaching African American history in the schools. And the partners in that are Grounds for Sculpture, the 1804 Consultants, the William Trent House Museum, and the Stoutsburg Sauerland African American Museum. So that's another, and they've gotten some small funding, not so much foundation as from state agencies, but I think they've done very well. I think the agencies have been very, very open to what they're doing because they are combining their resources instead of staying as these small little discrete operations.
That's a great example. And I know that foundations love that and push that because it's easier to manage on their side, to have a group of you all trying to make a change.
Right. And you can you have a bigger effect. You can do it, whatever it is you're doing, you can do it in a bigger way because you have more hands on deck. So yes, but it does have challenges, as we know.
Yes.
Okay. Here's another question. What would I see as the most important difference between this crisis and other crises in the past with regard to grant seekers?
So that is a great question I know we're getting close to the hour to finish, and that is a good one that I would want to end on. Michelle, Corona has blown the lid off of all of the vulnerabilities, not only in our local communities, in our state, our nation, and the globe, even in our personal lives. And so it has, unlike 9/11, which was an event that affected us geographically in those locations, but it did change us in terms of security. Sandy, which was a moment in time where our infrastructure was devastated. This has touched on everything. And I want us to know that it is an opportunity for us to pause and get things right, because everything has been affected. Everything has been affected. And so it is a paradigm shift. And I really want to end on the note that it is an opportunity for the nonprofit sector who have been starved. You've been under-resourced. And now is the time for you to expose inequities and ask for what you need, and to serve your clients in a way that they deserved to be funded. We can do it better, and it's an opportunity. And so I do hope that answers the question. This is a biggie. It's a paradigm shift, and we need to make sure we're not hopeless, and that we turn things around. And if I can end, Michelle, because I did not plug Susan Hairston Consulting.
Yes,
make sure folks know to visit our website at susanhairstonconsulting.com. You can find us on LinkedIn. We offer a range of services to both foundations who want to work with a group of nonprofits, but we also can engage with nonprofits. We offer a whole suite. And so I hope that you will take a moment to check us out, and also the great services by my colleagues at Dennis Miller Associates.
Thank you so much, Susan. I'm seeing notes that saying people just loved this program, that it was very informative. Again, a recording with the slides will be circulated to you, hopefully before the end of the week. But Susan, I want to just say thanks again. This was terrific. And I want to wish everybody a fabulous afternoon.
Thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate your tuning in. And thank you, Michelle.
Okay, anytime. Take care, guys.